Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I get to ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency services. This episode's a little bit different. This one's emergency pod. As you can tell, it's coming out on an odd day. I got a phone call from a friend, referred me to a mutual friend of ours that's having some problems working in the federal government. I reached out to them and asked how I could help. So hopefully I can give my platform a little bit, raise awareness to the situation. But with that, my guest this week holds a PhD in environmental and occupational hygiene. They are the vice president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 3840, who represents employees that work at the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. This person works specifically with Firefighter Health Program and the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer. My guest this week is Dr. Micah Niemeyer-Walsh. Micah, hello. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So some of the people won't even know this because the episode hasn't come out yet, but Micah was actually my first podcast ever I did on Hazard Class. It still hasn't been released because the thing that we're discussing in that podcast hasn't been released yet. So at some point in the future, hopefully all that work that we have did that day will come to light and we'll be able to release that podcast and get that feedback. But she actually is going to be the first ever two-time guest, but you just haven't seen the first time that they were on. But so I get a call from Tim. He says, you know our mutual friend Micah? I said, I do. They're having some issues working for NIOSH with these recent cuts. And I said, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can do. All I can do is bring you here and hopefully give you a platform to share with the world, what's going on. I'm ignorant to it. I know a little bit about it from the headlines, but this is definitely a very much a tangible thing, hearing it right from your mouth. So can you give me a kind of a lowdown of what's going on?
Yeah. So first, it's important for me to say that I'm speaking on my own behalf and as a union member, not from my official position from the U.S. government. So I have to say that for my own protection, just to make sure it's clear. This is me speaking, as Micah. I'll start with like a high up view. When the new administration, the inauguration happened and they appointed Elon Musk to run the Department of Government Efficiency, or they're calling it DOGE, which isn't a department, it's just basically a committee. Essentially, since then, there have been a ton of attacks on federal employees across the federal government, and it's kind of indiscriminate. Of who it's impacting right now. So I think we can all be on the same page that there's probably some things that can become more efficient, but the problem is right now, the way that they're doing it isn't actually about efficiency. It's about privatization. They want to get rid of as many federal employees as possible so that they can privatize the functions of the federal government and then profit off of them. So, the first attack came as an email to all federal employees called the Fork in the Road. And it basically said, it's about to get really hard to be a federal employee. We're going to take away a lot of the things that you like about being a federal employee, and it's going to be really hard. So right now we're giving you the option to take a fork in the road and leave. Where you basically resign. You actually would respond to the email saying resign. It was like a text message subscription almost. It was crazy. And the first they send them at like 8 p.m. on Tuesday, like after the workday, or 9 p.m. on Saturday. And you could take this option to remain as a federal employee under basically saying that it's going to be not a fun time for you if you stay, or you can leave and get 8 months of paid time off and then you'll be considered like terminated in September. I mean, they even said like consider it a vacation, like an 8-month vacation if you want. And so it sounded like a scam.
How broadly were those emails sent up? Is that like every federal employee got some variation of that?
Every single federal employee got that same email.
Who did it come from?
It was indiscriminate. It came from Office of Personnel Management, which is like the management agency over all federal agencies that Elon Musk has essentially like taken over. And what's funny is he had actually sent out a similar email to Twitter or X employees earlier that day. So unfortunately, it's like he's trying to run the federal government like a startup, which it's not, because that's not how the federal government functions. We are a system that's in place to serve the American people. We're not just like a private company, so we don't function like that. But that's how they're trying to run it, essentially. And so, that was kind of the first, this is weird. And
how long ago was that?
That was in late January, early February. I can't remember the exact date. But yes, and it's been at the federal court level getting, there's a lot of legal stuff happening with it too, because people aren't even sure if that's like legal, if they're even allowed to offer that. Because that's 8 months of paid time off for anyone that signs up for that. That's taxpayer dollars. Like that seems not
crazy.
Right.
Yeah. Efficient. Sounds very efficient.
Very efficient, right? So, yeah, and I think I want to make it clear, like, this isn't at all about partisan politics. Like, that's not what this is about. This is literally about, like, services to the American people and, like, what's going to be harming them. So, after that fork in the road email came out, and we have lost some people to it, but not many. I will say, like, most people were like, mad. And we're like, federal employees, like civil servants, take these positions not because they pay particularly well or, it's not like a cushy job, right? We do this because we care about the mission. Like I have coworkers that literally took out student loans and made a career change to get into this field because they care about the work that they do. So when people got that fork in the road, we're like, no, we're not taking the fork. We care about our jobs. We want to keep this. And then after that, they've started terminating probationary employees. And so probationary employees are basically like 1 to 2 years. When you start off, you have less basically protections from getting fired. It's easier for them to terminate you. But it's usually it's legally only supposed to be for basically you lied on your application or like bad performance. However, in order to shrink the size of the federal government, DOGE, as I like to call it, decided to target the employees who had the least amount of protections and just try to terminate all the probationary employees. So anyone that was hired in the last 1 to 2 years, basically just trying to terminate them, which so these are like the new scientists that are just starting their careers. That's not just impacting the current, like the now, but that's also impacting the future. You're losing a whole couple years of, people that are future experts, right?
Is that happening? That's happening indiscriminately on the federal government across the board, or is that a thing that's more centralized to NIOSH?
Across the board. It's happening in every single federal agency. Some are impacted more than others, but I will say at NIOSH, about 7 of the people that we lost were firefighters. They were firefighters that were employed by NIOSH for a few different reasons. 4 of them were for the National Firefighter Registry for cancer. They were fire program specialists. Essentially, their job was to kind of be the liaisons between the NFR and different fire departments around the country to basically boost participation in the NFR program and use their expertise as firefighters to basically be able to communicate effectively with fire departments. And then the other firefighters that were terminated were firefighters from the Firefighter Fatality Investigation and Prevention Program, FFFIPP. It's a long one. But essentially, that program investigates firefighter fatalities, writes up a report about what happened, and then publishes it for fire departments across the country to read and learn from to prevent incidents like that from happening in the future. And so these are, fire investigators. And I would say that's relatively uncontroversial. I think that we can all agree that's probably a good program, right?
Yes.
And they let go 3 of those investigators out of I think there's only 5 or 6 total.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's over half of that program staff was let go because they just so happened to be probationary.
I don't want to get ahead of you, but is there rumblings of, I think Elon Musk is kind of known for his come in, slash everything to the bones, and then kind of rebuild from there. Is that what the rumblings are? Is that there will be a rebuilding at some point? We just don't know when, or is it we're just chopping it and keeping it small, or what's the rumblings?
So I think if you've read Project 2025 or anything in that vein, their plan is essentially to destroy the federal government. They want to make everything privatized, not owned by the taxpayers. And it's mostly so they can line their own pockets. So I don't think that it's in their plans to try to rebuild anything in a way that would benefit everyday working people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you get this fork in the road email, then they do this indiscriminate cutting of newer hires. Where does that put your work? Where does the work that you're working on through the Fire Cancer Registry, the stuff that we were working on with electric vehicle fires, there's all this work, and now you have less people, and I assume probably less funding for the work as well. Is that right?
So the budget is currently to be determined. The deadline for them to decide on the new budget is March 14th, and if they don't decide on a new budget by then, and them being, the Congress and the Senate, if they don't have that decided by March 14th, then the government may shut down. So that's one thing. That's kind of but every day is a new day and is a roller coaster. So that's kind of, really far away from me. I'm not even thinking about that yet.
Yeah.
But I will say the way that the biggest impact on my work right now is that there's been a sort of blackout on communications from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and also NIOSH, because NIOSH is part of CDC. When the new administration came in, they said no presentations at all, no publications at all, no travel to conferences, and no participation in any scientific or technical working groups. And so we thought maybe it was going to be a week or two for them to start, filtering in their people that they wanted in certain leadership positions. But here we are, and it's almost March, and that has not been lifted. That's part of the reason why I have to say I'm speaking as a union member, not from my official position, because I'm not allowed. So data that we have collected that hasn't been published yet is currently not allowed to be published. I can't talk about my research with people. And I mean, it's really concerning. We don't know how long it's going to last. And when, eventually we are allowed to talk about things, what that's going to look like as far as restrictions, I don't know. And I think that's honestly one of the biggest concerns, is that this is also an attack on science.
What would be their motivations for not allowing you to release the work that you've already done? What would be the harm in you coming on here and talking about your research? Is there any motivations that you're hinted off to?
I think that they want to have a high amount of control over what is available for the public to know. which, I don't want to make any predictions about their motives behind that, but I think regardless, it's a bad thing.
Do you think that, and this is going to be a lot of conjecture, so come with me on the ride, but do you think that there's there's obviously been this back and forth with COVID and the CDC and the World Health Organization, all this stuff. And so like there's this divisiveness in the American people and science and the government and science and all these things. Are you, as working in this firefighter health, cancer, you're doing science very specifically for something that's not related to that? Do you feel like you're being swept into like the controversy of all these other things when the work you're doing is pretty much everyone would agree is not controversial? It's just beneficial and helpful and everyone would support?
Yeah, I think that, that's a good point, and kind of shows how they're just like taking a hatchet to everything, not really being mindful of who it's impacting. Because what's funny is like the Trump administration is actually the one who signed the National Firefighter Registry for cancer into law. Yeah. So you would think that, that wouldn't be super controversial to keep us moving forward with our mission. But yeah, here we are being really badly impacted by it. So
and tell me if I'm crossing lines of things you can't talk or not. But are you possible, like for I know we haven't released the other podcast where we talk about some of these things. Are you able to, even on a broad scope, explain that the National, the Firefighter Registry for Cancer? Is that possible or no?
Probably not. I probably shouldn't do that.
Okay, that's perfectly fair.
Like, yeah,
I would try to explain it, but I would probably do a bad job. I would try to explain it, but what I will do is encourage the listeners to look into it if you haven't heard of it. It's an awesome program that's aggregating data for us to be able to use in tracking cancer in the fire service. And we're looking for a lot of participation from a lot of people, and it will be good. And I'm speaking on behalf of someone that's much less educated about this than Micah, but hopefully I did okay. But look into it. I don't want to be that guy that says, do your research online, but find a credible website and read about it. So as we think about this, what are the long-term impacts of a delay? So like you have to take a hiatus from here till, I don't know, pick a date in the future, a few months, in the best case scenario, maybe. What are the long-term implications of a complete arrest of science for a period of time?
Well, I mean, that means that we can't advance our knowledge, and especially in areas that I talked about with you the last time that we had. This is really important work that needs to get done, and we need to be making progress because these science, as it's a serious thing that impacts people's lives, their health, their well-being. And not being able to make progress on that is, has serious consequences.
So when you say there's a communication blackout, how is that elicited? How are you getting some sort of message that says you can't do these things, and then you're like, and then there's no one to then ask a question to about when you can start again? Or is it just like, I mean, I obviously know it's a vast system. You're not just going to talk to your superior and they make the call, but what's that communication stream like?
It's very not normal. Normally we would go through our normal supervisory chain, and they would review anything that we're putting out there publicly, whether that be a presentation or a publication, or getting permission to participate in scientific working groups. It would be our supervisory chain that would make those decisions usually. However, in this case, it's coming up from on high. I actually don't even know who is making these decisions.
So who tells you that?
Definitely not my immediate supervisor.
Yeah. So
it gets filtered down the chain of command, basically. But
and then they're just kind of an indiscriminate waiting for someone to change their mind.
Yeah, pretty much. And, as a union member, like the union obviously is trying to fight back on a lot of these things. Like that's what the union is for, right? Mm-hmm. But that is kind of the attacks that we're facing right now.
Do you know if the IAFF has got involved at all on your behalf?
I believe they have. So my union is the American Federation of Governmental Employees, AFGE. And I know that they do have a relationship with IAFF at the national level. And my understanding is that they are in communication about how the attacks on federal employees are also attacks on firefighters, because firefighters are getting terminated directly, but also like information that we put out there and like the programs that we have as federal employees impact like career, volunteer, wildland firefighters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I know that the way I felt about it, obviously knowing you personally, but also, when I got the call from Tim saying what was going on, I was like, oh my, like there was an actual tangible, like, not just because I know you, but like, I know the work you're doing is valuable for my coworkers and the people that work in this field. Like, so like to see a blockade come up for that work is really, really frustrating, especially when it seems to be kind of indiscriminate, hatcheting, to use your phrasing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I have questions, but I already feel like there's not answers, which I'm sure is even more frustrating for you than for me. But I was going to say, like, well, where do we go from here? And the answer is probably what? We have no freaking clue. Is that basically the answer?
Well, I will say, everyone should just stay as informed as they can about what's going on and talk to the people who you think should know, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's like your coworkers, your friends, your community members, talk to them about what's going on if this is impacting you. If you have feelings about it, share that. Obviously, as you have the ability to contact representatives if you so choose. And if you are a union member, talk to your union leaders about this and how this is impacting you as a worker. And, see if your union leadership would be willing to take some action as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about what's happening and spread awareness. Because, we need all the support we can get right now. If you know a federal employee, give them a hug or a high five or a pat on the back, because they're probably having a bad day. Yeah,
well, they got that fork in the road email. I guess if nothing else, they told the truth once, right? And they told you that it was going to be a tough road, unfortunately.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're pulling for you. Hopefully things get better soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.